Hello, my name is David Warren, and I will be presenting a project, the Back to Africa movement. The Back to Africa movement in America began in the early 1800s. It was a plan to send freed slaves back to Africa. The reason behind the movement varied, and while some may have grown out of concern for the freed slaves, racism and worry about the growing number of freed former slaves compromised a major portion of the sentiments. I will be going through a series of questions that will explain this movement. Question number 1. When was Liberia founded? While Liberia was founded in 1822 by 86 freed slaves from America, 6 years earlier, in 1816, a Presbyterian minister from New Jersey named Robert Finley, along with others including Francis Scott Key and Bushrod Washington, a nephew of George Washington, founded the ACS, or American Colonization Society. At that time, many believed that freed slaves could not stay in America. They did not believe them to be equal to white men, a sentiment reflected by President Lincoln almost 40 years later in an 1854 speech in which he stated, quote, "Make them, Negroes, politically and socially our equals. My own feelings will not admit to this, and if mine would, well, we well know that those of the great mass of white people will not." End quote. In 1821, the ACS was finally able to purchase some land in Africa, which has since become the site of Monrovia, the capital of Liberia. This paved the way to the 1822 founding of Liberia by former slaves from America. In 1847, Liberia declared its independence from the ACS, which he had founded it. This independence was not recognized by the United States, however, until 1862. Next question. Where is Liberia? Liberia is on the west coast of Africa, bordering the Atlantic Ocean. The capital, Monrovia, is approximately 400 miles north of the equator. Next question. What kind of government has Liberia had since its founding? Liberia formed a republic form of government after the government of the United States. Its first president was Joseph Jenkins Roberts, from Virginia, whose parents had been freed black slaves. The African Americans who settled in Liberia and their descendants have been known as Americo-Liberians. Although the Americo-Liberians have been a small percentage of the people living in Liberia, political power has been concentrated among this group. In 1980, the president of Liberia was overthrown in a coup by Samuel Doe and about 20 soldiers. From 1980 to 1990, Liberia was governed by a military dictatorship under Samuel Doe. Although there were some elections during this time, they were not real elections. Doe was assassinated in 1990, but the struggle for control continued. Warlords competed for control of Liberia. In 1996, the warlords signed a treaty and Charles Taylor was elected president not because the people liked him, but because they desperately hoped for peace. Following continued turmoil and a civil war, the first female president, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, was elected in 2005. Next question. What role has the United States or individual states had in Liberia over the years? Liberia was founded by freed slaves from America on land purchased by the ACS. Its flag is modeled after the U.S. flag. The original role of the U.S. with Liberia was as a place to send freed African American slaves. It was the U.S. Navy that was able to acquire the land for the settlement. Liberia was recognized as independent by many European countries in 1847, but it was not until 1862 that the U.S. finally and officially recognized its independence. Liberia was the first independent African country during a time when Africa was being increasingly colonized by Europe. The United States has had a special interest in Liberia. During the Cold War following World War II, Liberia was an African outpost for America to stop the spread of communism. The Voice of America, which was used to combat communistic propaganda, was broadcast from Liberia. Next question. What is the history of Christianity in Liberia? And what is the history of Islam in Liberia? In the 1800s, missionaries went to Liberia to spread Christianity. There were also Christians among the freed African Americans settling Liberia. Reverend Lot Carey had been a pastor of over 800 free blacks in Virginia when he settled in Liberia in the 1820s. According to the Evangelical Times, quote, the early missionaries were convinced that Christianity was synonymous with civilization, unquote. Roughly 20% of Liberians are Muslims, with most of those being Sunni Muslims. Islam came to Liberia in the 11th century. Mamadou Dukuli was the first Muslim elected to a high-level position in Liberia. He had to denounce Islam and accept Christianity in order to do so. In 1980, when the president of Liberia was overthrown in a military coup, Liberia became a secular nation. In recent years, proposals have been made for a state religion based on Liberia's Christian heritage. Next question. What are some of the neighboring countries of Liberia? And what sort of relationship has Liberia had with them? Sierra Leone is to the northwest. Guinea is directly north, and the Ivory Coast is located to its east. From my reading, it seems that unrest and civil wars in Liberia has led to a refugee situation that has affected the neighboring countries and resulted in the loss of many lives. Next question. How have the Americo-Liberians gotten along with the indigenous, African, or other immigrants over the years? The Americo-Liberians adopted the ways of the rich plantain owners. They set up plantations that were labor-intensive, and the Americos became the elite, and the indigenous people became the oppressed. The indigenous people were denied voting rights, denied citizenship, denied property rights, and forced into labor. Samuel Doe, the military dictator who came to power in 1980, was an indigenous Liberian. Next question. Zach? Did you notice any areas where American customs, interests, or habits, good or bad, show up in Liberian history? And what are they? Well, the Americans brought southern customs from dress to plantation ownership and architecture. They also brought the African slave spiritual songs to Liberia. Next question. Based on my study of Liberia, the African colony for free black slaves, was it a good idea or a bad idea? I have mixed feelings on it because Liberia is predominantly a Christian nation and spreading Christianity is good. The way the Americos oppressed the indigenous people was bad, but ultimately we can't go backwards and undo slavery by returning people. And here's my bibliography. I hope you like this presentation. Thank you.